There are moments when a single glance, a simple gesture, can tilt your entire world toward a point of no return. Will you dare to follow it all the way to the truth? The memory of that precise instant when he stepped through the threshold lingers vividly in my mind. Not due to its dramatic or theatrical nature. It was not, without a suitcase trailing behind him. There were no embraces that had been absent for ages, nor were there any shouts of astonishment. Just a simple nod, a shy smile, and a dry hey, as if he were entering a life that had moved on without him. Yet, an unseen change lingered in the atmosphere. A silence that eludes definition. He had matured. It had been years since our paths last crossed. Not since he was a gangly youth spending a summer there. Now, standing tall and lean, clad in a faded gray t-shirt that clung to his chest in the warmth, with a faint shadow on his jaw, he resembled a man capable of renting a car rather than the one who had once assembled Legos on my living room floor. He spent the summer here. The nephew of my husband, assisting with the revival of furniture, residing in the guest room, sharing meals at our table. Everything had been determined in advance. It was settled in my absence, and I offered no objections. I did not. Our home had perpetually embraced a serene atmosphere, more structured than inviting. Yet it performed admirably. We operated effectively. The initial days unfolded with the familiar routine. Courteous exchanges during coffee breaks, fleeting looks across the dinner table, subtle acknowledgments in the corridor. I became aware of details that were perhaps best left unnoticed. He took his time drying his hands after washing them, each movement deliberate and unhurried. The subtle shift of his collarbone beneath his skin as he extended his arm to retrieve an item from the upper shelf. I reassured myself that it was inconsequential. I convinced myself that my heightened awareness was merely due to his novelty in the household. Unknown, however, that was not the case. One morning my husband had departed for work. The kitchen was filled with the delightful aroma of fresh peaches mingling with warm cinnamon. I found myself immersed in the art of muffin making. He stepped in without shoes, his hair a bit wet from a hasty shower, his eyes lingering in the remnants of slumber. His movements carried an unsettling quality, as if they were choreographed by an unseen force, neither provocative nor conscious, simply authentic, comfortable in his own skin, with ample space. He leaned against the counter, stifling a yawn, and remarked, "You seem like the kind of person who can brighten up a morning." I refrained from replying right away. I stirred the batter with an unhurried grace. Focus on the bowl. My heartbeat had transformed, calm, yet unpredictable. As I finally turned my gaze towards him, a smile broke across my face. A smile offered to a stranger on the brink of crossing into familiarity. "Only muffins," I declared. It was more than mere muffins. The dress I selected that morning was the one that caught my eye, a delicate cotton garment that embraced my waist. I convinced myself it was merely a consequence of the weather. Yet, within the confines of the closet, other dresses awaited their moment to shine, more relaxed ones, more secure options. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I sensed a shift within me once more, another ensemble, as though the initial attempt had somehow missed the mark. I was left in the dark. Perhaps I did, after all. The silk camisole I donned beneath my sweater seemed entirely out of place for a Wednesday evening spent at home with no intentions of venturing out. Yet, the mere idea of him catching a glimpse of the lace's delicate outline, even unintentionally, sent a shiver across my skin. In the quiet of the hallway, I found myself standing still, attuned to the sounds around me. My husband was situated upstairs, engaged in a conference call. The guest room door eased open with a soft creak. A gentle cascade of light poured into the corridor, forming a warm golden ribbon. He sat within the confines of the room, pencil in hand, capturing an idea on the desk before him. "Keep your head down, concentrated." I lingered on him for 3 seconds more than was wise. He failed to notice my presence. I averted my gaze before the fourth. Excuses began to flow from my mind. "Would you be so kind as to assist me in transporting this to the garage? Do you believe this chair has the potential for restoration? Is this lamp appearing askew?" Small details, seemingly benign, nestled within the confines of home. Yet, beneath the surface, a pulse resonated. On a serene afternoon, we found ourselves in the backyard, nurturing the rose bushes. He toiled in the earth, fingers immersed in the rich, dark soil, beads of sweat glistening as they journeyed down his jawline. As I tended to the plants, it seemed that more water found its way onto my sandals than to the roots below. He rose to his feet, cleared the soil from his hands, and approached me with purpose. "You missed a few," he remarked, pointing at the parched leaves scattered around. "Imperfect things hold a certain charm," I found myself saying without a second thought. He gazed at me for a moment that stretched just a bit too long. "Indeed," he remarked at last. "I can discern." That evening, I lingered in the shower more than I typically would. I meticulously cleaned every inch of my skin, as if readying myself for an event, despite the absence of any actual plans. I selected a deeper hue of lipstick, only to remove it moments later. I found myself unrecognizable in the mirror, not due to the passage of time or weariness, but because I was examining my reflection as though it belonged to another. Could be his, perhaps. It arrived without fanfare. Once more, he found himself in the kitchen, stretching his arm toward a glass perched on the top shelf. His shirt rose just enough to expose a sliver of skin. Limited. Stretched tight. I found myself trailing behind him, carefully placing the dishes in their rightful spots. Excessively near. He retreated, his gaze averted, and his shoulder grazed my arm. A gentle caress. Concise. Electrifying. He offered no apology. He remained motionless, and I mirrored his stillness. It held no significance. And yet it came to pass. It encompassed all that remained unvoiced. As the evening wore on, I found myself wandering past the guest room once more. The door stood slightly open, and he was engaged in a phone conversation. I had no intention of eavesdropping. I happened to be strolling past. Yet, his voice carried a gentle softness, quieter than it typically was. "No, I don't believe I'll be going anywhere this summer," he remarked. "This place resonates with me. This place feels distinct." For a fleeting moment I held my breath. In what ways does it differ? Is it due to the proximity of the beach? Those serene evenings spent over dinner? Or could it have been me? I quietly withdrew before he could catch sight of me. Beside my husband in bed, I found myself gazing up at the ceiling. His breath came in a calm, measured rhythm. I extended my hand beneath the blanket, intertwining my fingers with his. The warmth enveloped the surroundings, recognizable. Yet my body remained unresponsive. Not with revulsion, not a trace of resentment. Simply silence. It's akin to grasping a photograph of an instant, rather than experiencing the instant itself. In that moment the realization struck me. I was not drifting away. I had already departed. What could possibly be more disheartening? Uncertainty lingered within me about my return. Once more, we would find ourselves in the kitchen come tomorrow. He would utter something nonchalant. I would find it amusing. Thus, the cycle would commence anew. Delve a bit further, just a bit nearer. A gradual unfolding. Unforeseen, unvoiced, yet unavoidable. The following morning unfolded with an unsettling sense of normalcy. As was my custom, I was the first to awaken. The kitchen light was unyielding, casting a stark glow, while the windows, shrouded in condensation, concealed a garden that lay in tranquil slumber, draped in muted greens and grays. Without a moment's thought, I swung open the fridge, retrieved the eggs and milk, and instinctively grabbed the familiar chipped mug that had become my constant companion, the one I could never truly substitute. All my actions felt like a well-known routine. Placing the pan on the stove, I glide my finger along the counter's edge, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Yet, a force within me throbbed with an intensity one could not suppress. The atmosphere enveloping me was thick, as if it shared in my very breath. Or alongside him, he entered the room with bare feet, clad in a gentle gray t-shirt and dark sweatpants. His hair had a charming disarray, still glistening with moisture from a hasty shower. He appeared completely comfortable in his own skin, oblivious to the way each motion drew the air around him closer. He approached the sink and filled a glass with water. Silence reigned. Nothing transpired. And yet, all things unfolded. "Good morning," he spoke, his voice low and slightly husky. I inclined my head, responding in a gentle tone. A typical morning unfolds once more. Yet, a subtle tremor coursed through my fingers as I raised the mug, and he caught sight of it. "Are you all right?" I offered a smile, deliberately avoiding his eyes. "Struggling to find rest?" I declared. Perhaps it was an excess of coffee last night. It was evident that he held skepticism towards my words. Yet he refrained from pressing forward. We found ourselves communicating in a mutual dialect of evasion, implication, and meticulously timed pauses. He lounged at the table, effortlessly crossing one leg over the other, his foot almost grazing mine beneath the surface. His presence enveloped me, a tangible warmth that lingered in the air. And then, just as I turned to face the stove, he remarked, "You wear that dress a lot?" I paused, caught in a moment that felt suspended in time. The dress, a deep shade of blue, was crafted from soft cotton, tailored to hug the waist with a subtly open neckline, modest yet purposeful. The type of dress that embraces your form, allowing you to revel in your own silhouette. "It's comfortable," I remarked after a brief silence. "What is the reason behind this?" He shrugged, his eyes meeting mine with a quiet intensity. It was the inaugural moment I truly caught his gaze upon me, not merely a glance but a thorough look. "You appear changed in that," he remarked. I averted my gaze, not out of shame, yet, had I lingered just a moment more, I might have found myself stepping toward him. "Come a little nearer." Allow the day to drift into an irrevocable realm. I found myself unprepared for that moment. Not at this moment. The remainder of the day unfolded as an unspoken pact to maintain our separation. I departed the house for a few hours, asserting that we were out of salt and paper napkins. Yet, the majority of my time was consumed by wandering aimlessly through the grocery store aisles, collecting items that held no real necessity. My musings had transcended mere thoughts. Only feelings, his complexion. His voice resonated. The burden of his gaze. Upon my return, I found him in the backyard, diligently restoring an old wooden chair. He crouched low, sanding the edges with smooth, assured strokes. His shirt hung loosely, unbuttoned halfway, the fabric clinging to his back, dampened by sweat. The movement of his shoulders possessed a certain rhythm, and I lingered at the door for a moment, simply observing. I presented him with a glass of water. "Thank you," he remarked as he accepted it from my grasp. His fingers grazed against mine, a touch both rough and inviting, radiating warmth. He took a sip, casually wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and then turned his gaze towards me. Not directed at the chair, nor aimed at the tools, but rather focused on me. "I believe it will hold," he remarked, giving a nod toward the chair. "I expressed my hope," I replied. "It predates our union." He arched an eyebrow. "What is the duration of your relationship?" 17 years, he hesitated. "Is it really that long?" "Some days stretch on endlessly, while others seem to slip away in the blink of an eye." He smiled, yet an enigmatic quality lingered in his expression. "You hardly appear to have the years to back up 17 of anything." "How thoughtful of you," I replied, attempting to convey a sense of amusement. Yet my voice fell short of its destination, for beneath his words lay a profound depth, query, acknowledgement, and within my own, a response I was reluctant to voice. As the evening wore on, I found myself indulging in an unusually prolonged shower. I applied the lotion I reserved for those rare, cherished moments. Underneath my pajamas, I donned the delicate black lace. Certainly not for his eyes to behold, naturally, simply for that reason. Merely as a precaution. The clock was close to striking midnight as I made my way down the stairs. I mentioned that sleep eluded me. Perhaps I was unable to. Perhaps I needed to check if he remained awake. He reclined on the couch in the living room, absorbed in the pages of a book. Only the gentle glow of the lamp behind him illuminated the space. The room appeared as though it had been plucked from the depths of a memory. Recognizable. Silence. Gloomy. He propped himself up a bit. "Struggling to find rest?" I gave a slight shake of my head. "And you?" He raised the book aloft. "I find myself revisiting a text that eludes my comprehension." I considered that perhaps the second attempt might prove beneficial. I smiled and ventured deeper into the room. At times, the repetition only deepens the wound. He inclined his head, observing me intently. "Your appearance has a unique quality this evening." I didn't inquire about the method. I settled into the embrace of the armchair's edge. A profound silence enveloped us, yet it was far from vacant. The space was brimming. Of a substance thick and ascending. I shifted my gaze in his direction, poised to utter something light, innocuous. Yet, the opportunity eluded me. He leaned forward deliberately, as though gauging the heaviness of the atmosphere, and then it occurred. The kiss came unexpectedly. Initially, it wasn't even a kiss, only the convergence of breath and warmth in the slightest caress of lips. His hand gently cradled my cheek. Uncertain, respectful. Our lips scarcely parted, yet something within me shattered wide open. I remained steadfast. I remained calm. I simply allowed myself to experience my emotions. He rose to his feet, his chest heaving with rapid breaths. He averted his gaze as he murmured, "I'm sorry," and ascended the staircase. I lingered on the couch, my fingertips lingering against my lips. I remained still. I was unable to. Regret was absent, merely astonishment. Not from the events that transpired, but from the depth of my desire for it. And on the morrow, tomorrow, we shall gaze upon one another and feign. Imagine if we remained merely family, merely visitors in one another's existence. Yet I was aware of the truth. For when your lips have brushed against another's, the world shifts irrevocably. Yet I found myself yearning for more. Throughout breakfast, he averted his gaze from me. Neither from a place of shame nor from discomfort. It was not that. He exhibited a demeanor of politeness, maintaining a quiet presence, and was attentive when engaged in conversation. Yet there was a subtle change in the way he carried himself. As though he were making a conscious effort to minimize his presence. It seemed as though he was making a conscious effort to avoid exacerbating the situation. I observed him from the other side of the table, my fingers absent-mindedly swirling the spoon in my coffee. The kiss lingered in the air between us, not referenced. Yet, it remains unmistakably evident. It hung in the air like a thick fog, rendering each word, each gesture laden with weight. My husband occupied the space between us, engrossed in his phone, completely unaware. He was a shield against the chaos around him, a barrier that stood resolutely between us. Yet, it was precisely that element which rendered the recollection of the previous night strikingly intense. Following breakfast, my husband prepared for a brief business trip. A client from out of town whom he needed to meet face to face came as no shock. He had brought it up a few days prior, and I had acknowledged it, making the requisite changes to our timetable. In that moment, it seemed to hold no significance. The mere idea of spending another week alone in the house with him and the nephew stirred an unsettling tension deep within me, a blend of excitement and apprehension. My husband pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek before departing, murmuring something about traffic as he reached for his overnight bag. He remained oblivious to the way my hand hesitated on the edge of the table once he had shut the door. He failed to inquire whether I required anything. He never did. As I pivoted to face the kitchen, I found him poised in the doorway. He remained silent. I did not either. The silence bore a heavy significance now, a fresh form. It enveloped us, neither menacing nor avoidable. He strolled by, heading for a glass of water, and I sensed his presence sweep through the room like a gentle breeze. He stood within reach, yet felt more distant than ever before. "Would you like me to venture off somewhere for a few days?" he inquired, his tone subdued, measured. "Negative." I spoke too hastily, then fell silent. "The number, it's really not needed." He nodded, yet chose not to pursue further. There was no necessity for him to do so. The mere act of his offering indicated that he was already contemplating what I was desperately trying to avoid. Being in that same space once more would render it impossible to forget, to desire nothing. That afternoon he returned to the backyard, diligently focused on a small wooden chest we had discovered at a flea market months prior, yet to be restored. I observed him from behind the glass as I meticulously folded the laundry, or feigning to. His arms swayed with a graceful rhythm. His expression focused, a subtle furrow forming between his brows as he meticulously sanded the surface. His methodical approach, the meticulous attention to detail, and the unwavering patience he exhibited stirred a deep longing within me. My husband embodied efficiency. Every aspect of our existence carries a purpose, a function, a rationale. Even our moments of closeness, when they occurred, seemed prearranged, dependable, quite satisfactory, not unpleasing, simply devoid of astonishment, of marvel. I stepped outside, my mind a blank canvas. The warmth enveloped me, akin to a comforting blanket, while the aroma of freshly cut grass and sawdust permeated the atmosphere. With careful steps, I made my way forward, my bare feet grazing the ground, a glass of lemonade cradled in my hand. "You've been out here for hours," I remarked. He raised his gaze, narrowing his eyes against the brightness of the sun. I failed to observe. I offered him the drink. Our fingers brushed once more, and this time neither of us recoiled. I remarked, "You excel at this." He lifted the cup to his lips, savoring a delicate sip, and a subtle smile graced his face. "It's the sole force that tempers the whirlwind of my thoughts." "What occupies your thoughts when they aren't taking their time?" He took a moment to stop, gazed upon me. The look on his face revealed an internal struggle, as he weighed the decision of whether to respond with the truth. Then with great care I kept my gaze fixed. I ought to have. Yet I refrained. We lingered in the cool embrace of the shade, the distance between us diminishing despite our feet remaining firmly planted. My heart thudded in unexpected rhythms. Wrists, knees, the hollow of my throat. "You really shouldn't say things like that," I whispered. Yet it is indeed true. In that moment, truth held a perilous edge, not for the sake of destroying lives, but rather for shattering the silence we both held onto so desperately. A hush enveloped us, shielding us from the flames smoldering softly beneath the surface. As the day wore on, I proposed that we enjoy our dinner al fresco. The air had taken on a chill, the light transforming into a warm golden hue as it danced through the branches of the trees. Candles flickered to life, napkins were artfully arranged, and a bottle of wine, long reserved for an occasion yet to come, was finally uncorked. He proposed to prepare a meal, featuring grilled vegetables and fish. I allowed him to continue without interruption. Our conversation was sparse, yet it carried an ease that felt natural. It felt as though time had come to a standstill, similar to the silence that lingers between two notes in a melody. There came a moment when I noticed him observing me. As I extended my hand to grasp an object on the table, I sensed his gaze following the delicate curve of my collarbone, the gentle arc of my shoulder. It enveloped me, a warmth pressing against my skin. In that fleeting moment, I found myself holding my breath. "You look stunning this evening," he remarked. A chuckle escaped my lips, not from a place of disbelief, but rather due to the peril that belief seemed to carry, to embrace that truth. And yet it enveloped me, gentle yet uninvited. Once dinner had concluded, I began to collect the dishes, yet he intervened. "Join me," he urged. There was a moment of uncertainty. Where might that be? Simply arrive. We strolled behind the house, where the ancient garage had been transformed into a unique studio space. It was seldom utilized by my husband. The space was filled with a haphazard collection of various items, unfinished furniture, boxes filled with forgotten treasures, cans of paint that have nearly dried. As he swung the door open, a shroud of darkness enveloped him, the silence profound, punctuated only by the rich aroma of wood and varnish that lingered in the air. He flicked on a solitary lamp nestled in the corner. A beam of light cascaded over a canvas leaning against the distant wall. I was unaware of his talent for painting. I was the one, not exactly, not in the manner of a portrait. Yet the form was undeniably clear. The angle of my head, the arch of my spine, ensnared in the moment of grasping for the unseen. With my hair cascading freely, I stand with an open and relaxed demeanor. It was not a woman in disguise. She was a woman lost in her own world. "Did you create this painting?" I inquired, my voice quieter than I had hoped. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "When will it be?" He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "On that initial night, when slumber eluded me." I averted my gaze, for the burden of it felt insurmountable. For there existed a certain sanctity in the act of being observed in such a manner, unadorned, unembellished, yet undeniably present. "You can't keep doing this," I said, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "What are you up to?" It becomes increasingly difficult to remain untouched by the weight of emotions, stillness. And then, with such subtlety, "I understand." As we stepped out of the studio, a refreshing chill enveloped the air. A shiver ran across my skin, though it was not the chill of the wind that caused it. We remained untouched. Our lips never met. Yet, as I reclined in bed that night, the vision of the painting seared itself into my mind's eye. It transcended mere beauty. It transcended mere desire. It was a matter of being seen wholly softly without expectation. My husband had never witnessed me in such a manner. It has been 17 long years, and now I found myself unable to shake the thought of all that I might have overlooked, or what other offerings he might present. The following morning found him once more in the garage. I was aware without needing to glance. The cadence of his movements resonated in my ears. The rasp of sandpaper, the soft, persistent murmur of melodies filtering through his earbuds. He would occasionally pause, stepping outside to stretch or retrieve more tools. The door stood ajar, just as he had always preferred it, a beckoning, though neither of us recognized it as one. I drifted through my morning, as if attempting to linger in the shadows of time. I found myself lingering in the shower, the warm water cascading over me, longer than I typically would. Meticulously groomed, I lavished moisture upon every inch of my skin, as if readying myself for a grand ceremony. That day my wardrobe seemed to possess an unusual aura. I lingered before the closet, time slipping away unnoticed, gaze drifting over the fabric of cotton dresses, flowing linen trousers, blouses in muted tones that whispered of daily tasks and functionality. I extended my hand toward a cream-hued blouse that fastened down the center, gentle, translucent enough to suggest the delicate black lace beneath, yet insufficient to traverse any discernible boundary. As I finally emerged into the open air, the sun hung high in the sky. He knelt next to an aged dresser, carefully applying fine strokes to the drawer handles. He remained oblivious to my approach. I remarked, leaning against the doorway, that you had been out here all morning. He raised his gaze, narrowing his eyes just a touch. A solitary bead of sweat meandered down his temple. When I am immersed in my work, the passage of time takes on a unique rhythm. I nodded, feeling a sense of uncertainty about what to say next. The atmosphere that once crackled with tension had dissipated. It had transformed into a more subdued presence, increasingly perilous, acquainted with warmth. Awareness of the impending pain did not deter the hand from stretching forth. The warmth had begun to feel indispensable. After a moment's reflection, I suggested, I was considering a drive to that antique shop, the one located by the historic train station. There may be several items that could serve my client's needs. He cleaned his hands on a rag and rose to his feet. Are you seeking companionship? His inquiry was crafted with intention, not informal, serious in nature. His voice carried a weight I had never encountered before. He was not putting me to the test. He presented a moment that was irrevocable. Indeed, I affirmed, I certainly do. Silence enveloped us as we journeyed down the road, our words few and far between. The vehicle resonated with the whispers of the rushing wind, punctuated by the sporadic melodies emanating from the radio. I concentrated on the path ahead, yet his presence beside me was impossible to ignore. The subtle contact of his knee against the console from time to time, how his hand lingered on his thigh, tantalizingly near to mine. Upon our arrival at the shop, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, drawn in by the allure of dusty furniture and the charm of worn leather-bound books. The space resembled a labyrinth of neglected treasures, each object whispering tales of unknown lives. We meandered through it, occasionally parting ways, yet often finding ourselves drawn back together without a hint of awareness. I paused before the mirror. Lofty, ancient, the edges are ever so slightly chipped. As I gazed into the mirror, the woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes shone with an intensity that was almost blinding. Her lips were drawn tight. A flush crept across her cheeks, not born of the heat. He moved to stand next to me. The reflection in that mirror fails to capture your true essence. I chose not to respond. I feared that if I spoke, my voice would falter, burdened by the heaviness of all that remained unsaid. As we loaded a petite chair and a lamp into the car's rear, he inquired if I was interested in grabbing some lunch. A quaint diner sat nearby, a relic of the past with its worn red booths and glossy, laminated menus. We lingered by the window, sunlight spilling in, painting our table with golden stripes. He observed me intently as I swirled sugar into my tea, his eyes fixed and unyielding. There's a certain stillness about you. My mind is a whirlwind of thoughts, I confessed, yet there's insufficient room to contain them all. He inclined his body ever so slightly, a subtle shift that drew attention. Then speak one aloud. I gazed at him and within me something shifted, akin to a lock turning gently, yielding without struggle. I no longer recognize the person I see in the mirror, I confessed, uncertain whether this transformation is a blessing or a curse. His voice carried a hushed timbre. Perhaps this is the first moment you truly behold your own reflection. The words lingered in the air, weightier than the sweltering heat that seeped through the glass. The journey home stretched on, each moment dragging with a languid pace. I cannot recall what we traversed, only that my heart started to thrum in an unfamiliar rhythm. Our eyes met briefly, and in that instant, I found him already gazing back at me. He remained expressionless, his gaze unwavering. That gaze lingered in my mind long after we had arrived in the driveway. Within the confines of the house, a chill lingered in the air, shadows deepening as if it had been longing for our return. In the corner of the living room, I positioned the chair and extended my hand toward the lamp. As he extended his hand, my fingers lightly grazed his in the exchange. That brief touch ignited a sudden and piercing sensation within me. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. He did as well. He advanced with measured intent. "I think about you all the time," he murmured, his voice barely rising above a whisper. Even when I make an effort to refrain, my breath was momentarily suspended. My hands clutched the lamp, yet my body had become utterly motionless. As I rise from slumber, my mind drifts to the gentle swirl of your coffee, the melodic laughter that escapes you when lost in thought, and the graceful motion of your shoulders as you stretch to greet the day. He advanced another step. It transcends mere desire. It's a bit more complex than that. I released my grip on the lamp and stepped back against the wall, seeking the reassurance of something steadfast. His words had unraveled the delicate boundaries I had meticulously crafted in my thoughts. "You really shouldn't say those things," I remarked, though my tone betrayed a certain uncertainty. "But they are indeed true," he responded. "I believe you sense them as well." With my eyes gently shut, I wished to feign ignorance. I yearned to feign that I could walk away, untouched by the flames. "Do you really believe I haven't seen it?" He pressed on. "The way your fingers glide through your hair as I step into the room captivates me. The transformation in your voice when you utter my name is striking. Do you believe I haven't noticed how your hands tremble when we're near each other?" I blinked awake, and there he stood before me. Once more it draws near. Excessively near. Yet I remained still. "I'm not asking for anything," he murmured, his tone gentler now. "I wanted you to understand that I recognize your presence. Each and every one of you. It stands as the most exquisite thing I have ever encountered." That evening, I retired to my bed ahead of him. Self-doubt crept in, casting shadows over my resolve to remain alert, especially in light of his words. Earlier, my husband had called, a quick check-in, his voice echoing with distance and distraction. I assured him that all was well. I spoke the truth, not quite. Yet I found myself wide awake for countless hours. The sheets pressed coolly against my skin, and his words lingered, tracing their way like fingerprints along my spine. The embrace of sleep eluded me. Just the vision of him in that waning glow, sharing words I had never received from the man with whom I had constructed my existence. My mind wandered to the journey, the roadside diner, the quaint antique shop, the glimmering mirror, and the woman captured in its reflection. Unknown, throbbing, vibrant. For the first time, I felt no fear in her presence. I yearned to embody her essence. Suddenly, the rain descended, catching everyone off guard. It was not a gentle, soft drizzle, not the soft murmur that fades into the ambient soundscape. A torrential rain descended without warning, raucous against the panes, untamed and chaotic. The sky had turned ominously dark in an instant, leaving me no opportunity to retrieve the cushions from the patio or the basket of neatly folded laundry resting on the porch swing. Yet, none of it held any significance. That day was not meant to be. Outside, I discovered him drenched, battling to shield the incomplete dresser with a plastic cover. The water adhered to his shirt, now sheer, conforming to the contours of his back, his shoulders, his chest. His hair clung to his forehead, droplets cascading in thin streams down his jaw and neck. He resembled a masterpiece brought to life, a delicate balance of rebellion and acquiescence. I refrained from calling out. I refrained from providing an umbrella. I observed him through the glass, and every fiber of my being ignited with an intense heat. As he stepped through the door, soaked and panting, he discovered me poised in the kitchen. With my feet unshod, I donned a delicate cardigan that draped lightly over my camisole and leggings. I was completely unaware that I had taken off my bra during my earlier change. Perhaps I had indeed. I can no longer distinguish between what was a mere accident and what was deliberately planned. Our gazes intertwined. Small talk was absent. There was no courteous chuckle regarding the weather. Only quietude, a type that possesses a certain sharpness. He slowly removed his shirt, allowing it to fall onto the tile floor with a soft thud. My breath hitched. Though I longed to avert my gaze, I found myself unable to do so. His skin glowed with the chill, and his chest heaved in jagged, irregular breaths. "Please hand me a towel," he murmured softly. I nodded and made my way to the linen closet nestled just off the hallway. My hands trembled ever so slightly as I pried open the cabinet door. The towels were arranged with precision, each one perfectly aligned, pristine, unblemished, uniform. I selected the gentlest option and made my way back to him. He did not receive it from me. Instead, he remained motionless as I drew near, and I took the step I had previously denied myself the courage to take. I reached for the towel and gently applied it to his shoulders, gradually moving downward along his chest. I advanced with purpose, fully conscious of the distance that separated us, each step bringing me closer to you. His breath caught as my hand grazed his side. The warmth radiated from him, a palpable energy thrumming just beneath the surface of his skin. In that precise instant, I realized that an irreversible change was on the horizon. The towel fell from my grasp, landing on the counter with a soft thud. He advanced, drawing near enough for the scent of rain lingering on his skin to reach me. Grounded, pure, vibrant. His hand grazed my hip, lingering for a moment. The rhythm of my heart echoed in my ears, threatening to overshadow the tempest raging beyond the walls. "I need to know this isn't just in my head," he whispered. "No," I replied. Our lips met in a tender, heartfelt embrace. This time there was an unwavering certainty, a complete absence of tentative exploration. The kiss was profound, relentless. It snatched the air from my lungs, searing through my nerves like flames consuming parched foliage. His hands cradled my face, drawing me nearer, and I surrendered to the gravity of his presence. In the midst of the moment, the sensation, the choice I had resolved upon long before this evening. As we finally separated, the stillness in the kitchen was overwhelming. Outside, the rain persisted, yet within these walls, a different kind of rupture had occurred. Apologies slipped from his lips, yet the truth lingered in his gaze, revealing a different story altogether. "I am not," I responded, and indeed I was not in the slightest. After that, silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. He gathered his shirt from the floor and slipped away down the hallway. I lingered by the counter, hands pressed against the grain, gaze lost in the void. Every part of me pulsed with vitality, a gentle sensation of tingling. Fearful, thrilled, I experienced a vitality I hadn't known in ages, accompanied by a thrilling sense of peril. As the evening unfolded and the rain settled into a gentle drizzle, I stepped onto the porch to retrieve the laundry I had overlooked. Much of it lay drenched, rendered irretrievable, yet I felt no concern. The atmosphere had turned cool, infused with the earthy aroma of damp soil and pine trees. The sky hung like a bruised lilac, expansive and heavy, casting a somber hue across the horizon. He emerged from the shadows behind me. I did not turn. "You didn't need to say that," he remarked. "What did you say?" "That you feel no remorse." I was already aware. I turned then, slowly, and cast my gaze upon him. "Do you really believe that improves the situation?" "No," he replied, "yet it brings authenticity to the forefront." Once more we found ourselves enveloped in silence. A silence so profound, it emerges only after the truth has been laid bare. Retracing one's steps was no longer an option. Not following that. "I ought to feel a pang of guilt," I whispered. "Do you really?" I remained silent, for uncertainty held my tongue. The silence of the house enveloped the night, a stillness that felt almost palpable. My husband called around 9, informing me that he would be staying an additional day to wrap up some paperwork. I feigned disappointment, muttering something about the remnants of lasagna. He chuckled, expressing how much he missed me. The phone remained in my gaze, its silence lingering long after the call had concluded. The screen faded to black. My reflection gazed back at me. Later, I gazed into the mirror, examining my own reflection, the gentle rise of my lips, the subtle warmth spreading across my chest, the lingering memory of his touch etched into my skin. I donned a navy blue silk nightgown that embraced my form in ways that had long been overlooked. It had been ages since I last donned it. I had convinced myself that it was far too cold, far too much effort, and ultimately far too unnecessary for the life we lead now. Yet, it was not intended for my husband this evening. What of the woman adorned in it? She had changed completely. I nestled beneath the sheets, yet slumber eluded me. Restlessness coursed through my body, a vibrant hum of energy. I remained acutely aware of his presence, the heaviness of his form close to me, the warmth of his exhale, the urgency in his kiss. I played it over and over, each time more slowly, more profoundly, as if committing to memory the words of a scene I was destined to revisit. I held no regrets about it. Now is not the time, not the kiss, not quite how I expressed my agreement without uttering the word. What filled me with dread wasn't our actions, it was the depth of my desire for it to unfold once more. Before the sun had a chance to rise, I found myself awake, caught in a haze of confusion and unease. The atmosphere in the bedroom was thick, as if an unseen weight lingered just above my heart. The ceiling held my gaze for a time, as the wind whispered against the windows, creating a haunting melody. The old house sighed and creaked, settling into the embrace of the cool morning air. The space beside me lay vacant, the linens remaining pristine and undisturbed. I had arranged the bed with meticulous care the previous day, ensuring his side remained untouched. The symmetry bordered on agony. The morning following the second kiss, the second choice, carried an unmistakable air of distinction, not because there had been any alterations in the walls encasing me, nor in the furniture, nor in the rhythm of my days. All appeared just as it ever had. The subdued wallpaper lining the hallway, the dust-laden framed photos resting on the shelf, the soft, persistent hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Yet, a transformation stirred within me. I sensed it in my heartbeat, in the manner of my movements, slower yet more intentional, as if my skin had taken on an unexpected weight during the night. He had already descended the stairs by the time I entered the kitchen. The newspaper sprawled before him, pristine and unbothered. A mug of coffee warmed his hands, yet he left it untouched. He lifted his gaze as I stepped inside, only to swiftly avert his eyes once more. The boy who had kissed me, his hands pressed firmly against my ribs as if he sought to imprint the rhythm of my breath, had vanished without a trace. He had become increasingly withdrawn, serene, vigilant. "Morning," I whispered, my voice barely rising above a breath. "Morning," he said, his gaze averted from mine. I filled my cup with coffee and took a seat opposite him. The quiet that enveloped the distance between us had shed its weight of expectation. It had changed now, edgy, taut, brimming with inquiries we were unprepared to confront. At last he shattered the stillness. I ought not to have acted in that manner. Last night I gazed at him, my fingers encircling the comforting warmth of my mug. I was not taken aback by his words. They were hardly painful at all. Merely anticipated. "Yet you did," I remarked. "I am aware." Silence enveloped us for several minutes, words unspoken between us. The atmosphere felt tense, as if the very walls of the house had become conscious of our presence. Each creak of the floorboards, each groan of the pipes resonated with an unsettling intensity. "I believe it's best for me to maintain my distance," he remarked, rising to his feet. "For the time being, while he remains absent." It was neither a question nor a choice he was extending to me. I chose not to engage in a dispute. I allowed him to continue unimpeded. I merely nodded and observed him as he departed the kitchen, the back door clicking softly shut in his wake. On that particular day, I engaged in the act of cleaning, not due to any necessity of the house. It did not. Yet, it was simply due to my uncertainty about how to occupy my hands, through the lens of my thoughts. With the persistent ache that had nestled itself somewhere between my shoulder blades, stubbornly refusing to relent, I removed the linens from the guest bed, swept the vacuum behind the furniture, and arranged the drawers that rarely saw the light of day. I meticulously scrubbed the oven, thoughtfully rearranged the spice rack, and wiped down the inside of the fridge not once but twice. I exhausted every effort to erase the memory of his lips pressed against mine. His hands danced with a familiarity, as if they had traversed this path in another time. It was as if my body had already whispered to him the path to take. Yet, nothing seemed to make a difference. As the afternoon waned, a profound weariness enveloped me, though it was not of the body. My body danced like a marionette, while my thoughts spiraled endlessly. I settled into my seat at the dining room table and flipped open my notebook, the one I utilize for shopping lists, home enhancement concepts, and the rare sketch. I turned to an empty page. It was at that moment that I took up the pen and began to weave my thoughts into words. I penned my thoughts on the way he gazed at me that initial morning. His eyes held a blend of caution and curiosity, concerning the manner in which his voice lowered when we found ourselves in solitude, the lingering sensation on my skin, a gentle tingle that persisted for hours after his touch. I penned thoughts that had yet to escape my own lips, words I never wished to find inscribed in my own hand. Yet I persevered. I penned my thoughts on the unsettling feeling of no longer recognizing the person I had become, not due to a transformation within me, but rather because I had at last ceased to conceal the facets that had always existed, the elements that craved for more, the yearning for contact, not born from obligation or routine, but driven by a deep-seated desire. Gentleness. Listen closely. His arrival went unnoticed by me. His voice caught me off guard. What is that? I raised my gaze, heart pounding. He lingered in the doorway, a stack of mail clutched in his hands. His hair was tousled by the wind. Silence. I spoke too hastily, closing the notebook with a decisive snap. His gaze remained fixed upon it. He refrained from pressing. He strolled by me toward the counter, letting the mail fall without a glance at its contents. Then, without glancing back, he stated, "I'm not evading you out of regret for anything." I remained silent. I find myself keeping my distance, unsure of how to desire something so deeply without the fear of tarnishing it. That brought me to a halt. I rose gradually, the notebook firmly grasped in my hand. I moved toward him gradually, each step bringing me nearer until I could sense the warmth radiating from his back. "Do you believe this is something that can be safeguarded?" I inquired softly. He pivoted to meet my gaze, and for an instant the air around us stilled. "I fear that my actions might lead to dire consequences if I do not approach this delicately," he uttered. I shook my head in disbelief. "I fear I may have already met my downfall, long before your arrival." He regarded me as if I had just granted him the freedom to breathe again. I set the notebook down on the counter and turned to leave, not due to a desire to conclude the moment, but rather because I found myself unable to endure its weight any longer. I found myself clinging to a fragile semblance of control, even if only for another fleeting hour. In the stillness of the night, I found myself enveloped in shadows, a glass of wine cradled in my hand, while the living room was softly illuminated by the warm glow of a solitary lamp. The sound of his movements in the guest room reached my ears, the gentle creak of the floorboards, the subtle opening and closing of drawers. I envisioned him engrossed in a book, reclined on his back, gazing up at the ceiling just as I had done the night prior. The wine enveloped me in warmth, yet it failed to ease the ache of desire. I rose to my feet and made my way to the hall. The door stood slightly ajar. I chose not to enter. I remained silent. I stood there, my hand gently resting on the frame, observing as the sliver of light poured forth from within. And I lingered, just long enough to realize he had listened to my words. With a deliberate turn, I made my way back to my room. Isolated. Yet it remains marked, not any longer. The morning held a silence that felt anything but tranquil. The silence enveloped me, a weight pressing down, demanding answers to questions for which I had exhausted all justifications. I lingered in bed beyond my usual limits, gazing at the ceiling, my eyes following the delicate fissures in the plaster. Once more, my husband had departed at the break of dawn. He had scarcely sipped his coffee, had scarcely laid a hand on me in days. I sensed the growing chasm that lay between us. He simply couldn't grasp the reason. Perhaps he was aware, yet opted to avoid facing it. At times, the absence of sound proves to be a more comfortable companion than the harshness of reality. As I descended, I navigated the kitchen with the unfamiliarity of a visitor. My hands discovered cups, sugar, and spoons, yet I found myself absent in that moment. As I glanced at the oven door, my reflection came into view. My robe hangs slightly ajar at the chest, My hair cascades freely around my face, and my eyes possess a depth they once lacked. I appeared as a stranger to myself, or perhaps a ghost from my past long interred. He was there, seated on the back porch. He perched with his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze drifting far beyond the garden, where the roses began to fade under the relentless summer heat. He remained still as I opened the door, not even glancing in my direction. He simply stated in a hushed tone that he will come to understand it in due time. I lingered for a moment, my bare feet resting on the threshold, caught in a dilemma of whether to advance or retreat. He has indeed, I remarked. He simply refuses to acknowledge it. He lifted his gaze to meet mine then. What unfolds next? I found myself without a response. We lingered in silence for an extended moment. The porch groaned beneath our chairs, while a gentle breeze swept across the yard, stirring the lifeless leaves and allowing them to drift back to the ground. My gaze lingered on my hands. They seemed foreign to me. They had contained an abundance of truths that remained unspoken, and had brushed against countless matters I found impossible to rationalize. At last I confessed, I never wished to become this woman. I never imagined I would be the one to transform you into her. He responded, equally subdued. His voice carried no hint of accusation, merely the burden of comprehension. Later that afternoon, I informed my husband that I had to attend to some errands. He failed to inquire about the specifics. I navigated the winding roads, unaware of my destination, veering into paths long forgotten, gliding past neighborhoods that felt like distant memories. In the end, I found myself at the aged state park just beyond the town's borders, the one featuring slender paths and a weathered observation deck that gazed out over the lake. In those days, we would venture there, a time before the bonds of marriage, before life settled into its predictable rhythm and hushed tones. In those days when the quiet between us was a source of solace rather than separation, I found my way to the path, parking my car before stepping out. As I walked, my shoes stirred up tiny plumes of dust, while the distant calls of birds resonated in the sky above. I found myself at a crossroads, pondering the next step that lay ahead. I continued my stride, one foot in front of the other. There he discovered me. Uncertainty loomed over me as I pondered how he had discovered my whereabouts and what compelled him to pursue me. Yet he did. He arrived in silence, devoid of any intention, merely taking his place beside me on the deck, gazing out at the expanse of water. The lake glistened under the waning afternoon sun, its surface undulating softly as though it, too, wrestled with the desire to remain motionless. Eventually, he confessed that he had read the rest of the journal. I averted my gaze from him. Then you understand the extent to which this has progressed. Indeed, he replied. Yet I am aware that you chose not to write about him. Never. I shifted my gaze. He continued, reflecting on your words, on the woman you once were, the things you long for, the memories that linger. As for myself, a constriction gripped my throat. Your presence rekindles a sense of permission within me to desire once more. He advanced a step nearer. You exist. The gentle breeze danced with the scarf around my neck. The very one he had once remarked accentuated the green in my eyes. His hand extended, almost brushing against the fabric's edge, before it retreated to his side. I can't provide you with stability, he confessed, nor a plan, nor anything that truly makes sense. I understand, yet, should you request my presence, I would gladly remain. There it stood. Exposed and vulnerable, we stand together. Neither allure nor imagination. Merely a choice. A creation that defied the possibility of being undone. Once more, I gazed across the expanse of the lake. Every fiber of my being urged me to respond affirmatively, to utter the word remain, to embark on this journey wherever it may take me, regardless of the price to be paid. Yet, existence is far from a straight path. It is a knot. I found myself ensnared within it. That evening, within the familiar confines of the house, I set about preparing dinner as I often did. My husband returned home, placed his keys in the bowl by the door, and greeted me with a gentle kiss on the cheek. The aroma of grilled vegetables wafted through the kitchen. All appeared as it should. Once we finished our meal, he inquired if I would like to take a stroll. I agreed. As we strolled together through the neighborhood, our shadows elongated, casting a gentle silhouette upon the pavement. He recounted a tale of a client who was proving to be quite the challenge. I paid attention. He inquired about the nature of my day. I was not truthful. Upon our return, I lingered before the bathroom mirror, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity. I took off my earrings, cleansed my face of makeup, and gazed into the eyes of a woman who seemed uncertain of her place in the world. As the shadows deepened and the house fell silent, I ventured out into the night, solitary and contemplative. The warmth lingered in the air, while clouds began to gather in the sky. I strolled barefoot over the lush grass, my robe casually knotted at the waist, the wind tugging at its edge. He stood on the back steps, poised and expectant, not with anticipation but rather with simplicity. Anticipating, I remained silent. I settled next to him, our shoulders nearly brushing against one another. I must make a decision, I declared. I understand. In the end, someone inevitably suffers. Indeed, he made no effort to persuade me. He refrained from making promises. That was the very thing that intensified the challenge. Why does it seem that with every choice I make, I forfeit something irretrievable? For that reason you shall. I gazed upward at the night sky, its immense expanse weighing heavily upon me. In that moment I extended my hand towards his, not to draw him closer. Let go. Yet to utter, I recall, I have arrived. We existed in truth. In the quiet of the morning, uncertainty lingered over my thoughts, leaving me at a loss for words. I was uncertain of who would greet me at dawn's first light. Yet I was aware that this moment would eventually arrive. This final instant, suspended between what had been and what was yet to come, belonged to me.